If you've watched any of my videos before, then you would probably know that I am a video game god. I mean, the amount of skill I have on my pinky toe is probably equivalent to an entire competitive League of Legends team. So naturally, if I'm the pinnacle of what it means to be a gamer, then creating a video game should be no different. So that's exactly what I set out to do. I challenged myself to create a playable video game in 1 week using a program I have no prior knowledge of, Unity. Before we get into this challenge, there are a few things you should know. First is, although I've never used Unity before, I do have some prior coding experience. Not that it will help much, but I've taken AP Java and a basic game design course. Everything shown was recorded a while ago, so let's just say if you asked me to do something like this again with my current knowledge, it would go a lot better. Second, I am familiar with the 3D program Blender, and I use it to create some of the assets for my quote-unquote game. And third, I am a college student, and at the time of this challenge, I also had a part-time job, so although I had a week to work on this, not all my time could be dedicated to it. And one more point. For the sake of my hard drive, I cut out and or deleted some of the more mundane tasks. But everything important and all the progress updates are still there. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and start the challenge on day 1. All things considered, I started the first day of this challenge off pretty late. I mean, I wasn't even sure if I was really going to do this challenge up until a few minutes before I actually downloaded Unity. Nevertheless, I downloaded Unity and ran through one of their basic tutorials for a third-person shooter. The tutorial basically just taught you about Unity's UI and basic ways to manipulate the world, like applying gravity. After this, I decided it'd be a smart idea to follow a basic beginner's guide to making a Unity game, just so I could get my bearings on the program. I found and followed a tutorial from the Brackies YouTube channel, which has since been retired, but all their content is still there to watch and follow along to. The following through Brackies' tutorial, I learned how to do a good bit of really useful stuff, like making a character move and creating collision boxes. I'm not sure how fast the background footage is sped up, but going through a little more than half the tutorial actually took a good bit of time. I started recording at around 4 PM, and by the time I had realized it, it was already 11:45 at night. I decided it was probably the smart move to go to sleep and save the little bit of energy I had left, so this is the progress I made for day 1. I had wanted to fully complete Brackies' tutorial so I could focus on starting my game by day 2, but I'd be lying if I said I still wasn't happy about the progress I had already made. I started working on finishing the tutorial at around 11 AM, which you would think gives me plenty of time to complete it and start working on my game, but for some reason, and I honestly can't remember why, I finished the tutorial at around 9 PM. It's probably because of schoolwork or something, because I remember having been assigned an essay, but I have no idea why it took me so long to finish it. But anyway, this is the progress from the tutorial. It's really not that much different from yesterday's, apart being able to die and having multiple levels. Now, at this point, I've been thinking about what I should actually make my game about, and while doing extensive research and plotting multiple charts and graphs, I finally figured it out. I need to make a bad Sonic game. At this point, I started thinking about what I actually needed in terms of assets for making a Sonic game. I came to the conclusion that I wanted a third-person perspective game, so I needed a Sonic model to play as. I figured I could just make one in Blender, but I didn't know how much time that would take, so I tried to take the easy way out and find a fully rigged model online. After finding some really cool models online, I eventually found a compatible one, so I downloaded it and imported it into Blender. At this point, however, I reached my first major setback of the challenge. I saw Blender had an update available, so I thought to myself, well, this could only possibly help me by streamlining production and improving my workflow, right? Wrong. Once I updated Blender and imported the Sonic model back in, it turned out the new version of Blender completely destroyed all the textures on the model. Since at this point it was 1 AM, I decided to call it a night there and set myself the goal for tomorrow to find a brand new Sonic model to use, since it would have taken way too long to try and fix the one I already had. Day 3 rolls around and I promptly get up, join a Zoom call for class, and completely ignore my teacher while I work on my game. After a bit of looking around, I find a brand new Sonic model that looks good, and I download it. However, after importing it into Blender, I came across another pretty big setback. When I imported Sonic into Blender, he became what I can only describe as a spaghetti-boned mess. The model was fine, however, all the bones were crazy deformed and everywhere. I tried my best to fix them, even deleting them and making the bones myself, but no luck. This is when I decided to make a decision that would ultimately change everything. I chose to spend the rest of my time for this day creating my very own Sonic model in Blender. Now, I don't have much footage of me actually making the model since I did it throughout the day and, well, it took a while. But what I do have is the finished model before I started messing around with the animations. I decided to go with a more cute, 2D-ish low poly look for a few reasons. For one, it would have taken me a lot more time to make a more complex and detailed model. And two, it would have made making the bones and animation a lot harder, especially if I had to fix any problems later down the line. And that's all the progress for day 3. Pretty short day all in all, but I was still happy with the progress we made. And now there's only a few more steps before we can start everyone's favorite activity, coding. Day 4 started off with me changing all Sonic's limbs to have joints so it'd be easier to animate. Then I started working on some animations. The animations are all really slow and pretty janky because my plan was to speed them up and hopefully make them look a bit better in Unity. Then, at this point, I was finally able to create the project for my game. So I went into Unity and created a project titled A Terrible Low Poly Sonic Game. Then, after about 30 minutes of messing around, I finally managed to import the Sonic model into Unity. I don't have the footage of the next few progression steps because I was incredibly stressed and pretty much everything was broken, so here's the long and short of what I was experiencing. One entire side of my model had missing faces. If you don't know what a face is, then think of it like you have a cube. If you don't have a face, then basically that side of the model just isn't there and you can see through it. Then, after I got that fixed, the basic collision detection that allows Sonic to collide with other objects, i.e. Sonic and the ground, wouldn't work. Now, this next part I'm not playing up at all. I spent 5 hours straight trying to make this work. It was so bad that I ended up joining the Unity Discord and asking for help. To which no one replied because it was very late at night. Shortly after begging anyone in the Unity Discord to help me, and in the process of having a mental breakdown, I decided to hop in a call with some friends to try and distract me from the unrelenting ass beating the universe is giving me. Then, suddenly, after another hour of crying and relentless Google searches, I finally, somehow, managed to get the collision to work. Now, however small as an accomplishment this may have been, this changed my morale instantly. I figured now with all the main problems out of the way, I can finally get to the meat of this challenge and start actually programming my game. So I, with my sanity restored, went to sleep thinking about how I can implement code into my game. And this is the full progress from day 4. So far, the most stressful day of my challenge. We reached day 5, a Friday. But because it was Friday, that meant I only had a little bit of time to progress in my game because I have work at night. However, I was able to do a little bit. What I did was I worked on making a few more janky animations. Again, they are very slow, but I am able to speed them up in Unity, so it shouldn't be an issue. Next, I made a basic movement script. As you can clearly see, the movement script works perfectly fine. You know, in fact, Sonic moves so fast that it just looks like he's clipping through dimensions. So from that, I tried to make a script so the camera would follow Sonic as he moved. However, it only moved forwards and backwards and didn't turn. At this point, I was pretty tired because for one, I haven't been sleeping much at night, and two, working a job is inherently tiring. So I decided to call it a night and put all my remaining energy into the weekend, where I would hopefully make my game actually work. I went into the weekend feeling pretty motivated. I thought now that I don't need to worry about school and work, I could really focus and get the core of my game made. So, the first thing I did was start working on fixing the camera. My main goal for today was to get the movement code and the camera to work so that tomorrow I could focus on more of the gameplay elements like making enemies and being able to win and lose. After a surprisingly little amount of work, I managed to get the camera to work almost perfectly. Although, the problem is it's kinda hard to tell because regardless of the camera working, every time Sonic moves he falls over and squishes himself. But finally, after about 30 more minutes, I not only managed to get the camera working, but Sonic can finally move around without falling over. This was a huge step because now that the main hard part of the movement code was done, I was at a point where I could finally add the animations and make Sonic look like he's actually running, as opposed to sliding along the ground. And speaking of running, the first animation I decided to add was the idle and running animations. They were both unexpectedly easy to add, although they did come with their own set of fun bugs to deal with. For one, Sonic was back to falling on the ground, although this was an easy fix of just having to spawn Sonic closer to the ground. And two, when Sonic runs, he floats above the ground a little bit. I figured those were small enough bugs that I could continue implementing the final animations and work on them later. Next, I added the jumping animation, and also implemented jumping into the movement code. Sadly, this didn't work well at all. Sometimes when I would jump, Sonic would get an insane double jump, and other times he wouldn't get off the ground at all. I decided to make the executive decision to ignore this problem completely and instead just focus on making all the other animations work as intended. I thought the roll animation would be insanely easy to do. Just press a button, play the animation, and bam, Sonic looks like he's rolling. But for some reason, this happened instead. The animation says it's playing, but instead of Sonic actually rolling, he just does somersaults along the ground. I have no real idea why the animation doesn't work, but at this point it's 12 o'clock p.m., so I just decided to leave it for tomorrow, and finally, here's all the progress from day 6. As you can see, the camera ended up getting pretty shaky from implementing the animations, and also Sonic sort of floats above the ground. But all in all, I made a ton of progress, and I was still pretty happy with everything going into day 7, the final day of the challenge. Here we are, day 7 of my week-long challenge. I won't lie, at this point, I'm super tired, and honestly, pretty excited to be getting done with this challenge. I decided to give my brain a little bit of a break and allow myself to sleep until about 12 before I devoted the rest of my day to finishing this game. So, after feeling a bit more energized and excited to work, I open up Unity, and my running animation is gone. After a lot more tinkering around and re-importing all the animations, I finally get them working again. Although, because I had to re-import Sonic and all the animations, that also means I needed to go through every object on Sonic's body and make them all convex so Unity wouldn't scream errors at me. Since I was already mentally exhausted from recreating all my previous work, I decided to skip working on fixing the movement code for now and instead work on making coins and enemies. Making the coins was actually insanely simple. All I had to do was create some basic yellow discs and have them rotate. Then I made them disappear when Sonic ran into them and also gave the player a coin counter. The counter was a little awkward to do, but still way easier than it would have been to fix the movement code. After that, I started working on the enemy. I basically ripped all the code to make him move from a YouTube video I found, but when I hit play, it seemingly doesn't work, which is actually a good thing because the code works so that he can only move when he's placed on actual terrain. Here, he was placed on a box object that I've just been using as the testing area, so once I make the actual game terrain, he should start moving. Speaking of terrain, I figured now would be a good time to make it, so that's exactly what I did. I deleted all of my testing area and added a terrain object. It works as intended apart from Sonic's movement code still being, let's just say, rebellious. At this point though, I was starting to get a little bit stressed seeing as I've spent a lot of time on what I thought was going to be the quick and easy code, so I reluctantly decided to go work on the movement code again. After about 2 hours of struggling on my own, I decided it was a smart idea to ask the people on the Unity Discord if they could help. And help they did. I rewrote basically all of my movement code, but thanks to them it actually works now. Well, sort of. Sonic no longer runs in midair, which is good. However, now the jumping animation is completely broken. And on top of that, once Sonic's running animation starts, it never stops. But I was willing to overlook that in favor of never ever doing movement code again. At this point in the challenge, it's 11 p.m. Technically 1 hour away from when the challenge is supposed to end. And at this point, I was absolutely rushing. I mean, everything technically works, I just need to put it all together. So the first thing I do is I speedrun making the blockiest looking trees ever in Blender. Then I strategically copy and paste a bunch of them around the terrain so it feels less empty. Next, I added the enemies. I updated their code so that the enemy kills you when it hits you unless you had a ring, and then it made the enemy die if you rolled into him. And after that, it was 12 a.m., and technically the challenge was over. However, because the first day was pretty much just me learning how to use Unity and all the UI, and also because I still had school and work to do throughout the week, I decided to give myself a little bit more time. I gave myself until I went to sleep that night to finish the game, so realistically I only gave myself a few more hours. I didn't want to go overboard or anything with this extra time, so I just started working on the last major thing that I wanted to do for the game, which was making some kind of invincibility system for when you get hit. Everything was going surprisingly smoothly, all things considered. That is, until I tried making Sonic's model flash as an indicator of when he was invincible. Basically, after I updated the code to make them flash, the game started crashing every time I tried to run it, so I scrapped that idea. And next, I added the final aspect to the game, which was simply making a menu and a credit screen. And that's where I called time. At this point, it was 3 in the morning, and I was just super ready to be done working on this game. But before I went to bed, I did take the time and record my thoughts. So I'll go ahead and let that play out before I give you guys the conclusion of this week-long challenge. Alright guys, well I am as done as I'm gonna get, I think. It's pretty much 3 a.m. I've gone a little bit over the time. I'll probably speak about this later when I'm actually, doing the script for this video and stuff, but gave myself a little extra time. It is 3, and yeah, I'm gonna go to sleep, and you know what? That's it. This challenge is done. I made a very, very bad game in a week. I guess I'll give it a, give it a play right now, even though it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna export the thing later. Yeah, I'm gonna export it later. That's just because, I can't be bothered right now. I'll probably do it tomorrow or something. There's so many things that I would have done better if I could or knew how or even had the time. But you know what? It's okay. It's a first game. I don't really know what to say. You guys can hear it in my voice. It's 3 a.m. I am very, very tired. There's a lot I would have changed. I mean, for one, the 3 requirements I kind of had going in. Obviously, I wanted you to be able to win, I wanted you to be able to lose, and I wanted you to be able to, like, attack something. I wanted there to be an enemy. And I got 2 of the 3 done. You can lose, and you can attack the enemy. The winning just did not work. Like, I'll show you losing right now. Yeah, I mean, it's bad. That's it. And this was, I guess, making a game in a week. Now, some people may say this is a blatant ripoff of Sonic Frontiers. I mean, if you put these 2 games side by side, you cannot tell the difference at all. But in fact, Sonic Frontiers was ripping me off. Just take a look at the timestamp of my first clip. Way before Sega announced Sonic Frontiers. Now, I'm not saying Sega saw my game and hacked my computer to steal all my code to make Sonic Frontiers, but let's just say a very strong lawsuit is still pending. And there we have it, challenge complete, and I technically have a working game, depending on what your definition of a game is. In retrospect, I managed to do a surprising amount in only a week, and with basically 0 knowledge. However, although I did somehow manage to stay alive all week, there are a few things that I regret not making time for. Aside from the obvious issues of fixing jumping and the rolling and running animations, I really wanted to polish the game more by making better terrain, creating an actual model for the enemies, making a win or lose screen, and even the bold idea of making Sonic accelerate for the longer he's running. Maybe if I ever try this challenge again, I can do more with it. But with all that being said, at the very least, I tried something new and actually made what could be classified as a game, even if that game looks like a Sonic-inspired fever dream. Again, a lot of this footage is a bit old just because I haven't gotten around to putting it all together for a video until now, but I sincerely hope you enjoyed watching this. This was my first time ever doing this type of video, so it would mean a lot to me if you could like, subscribe, and let me know what you thought about it in the comments. But again, thanks for sticking around. Hope to see you in the next video. Peace.